Hello, my name is Volcata, and welcome to Terraformers, The Red Planet Awaits. I would like to thank Goblins Publishing for this early access preview copy. This is not the prologue demo, this is the full game, so what you see here is more or less what you should expect from the final release. In brief, Terraformers is a turn-based resource management game themed around colonizing and terraforming Mars. On the surface, this game looks deceptively simple, but gameplay layers multiple elements of decision making that brings a surprising and refreshing complexity to the genre. Each turn, your choices will require careful balance and frequent reassessment as new information, options, and events unexpectedly change your plans for good or for ill. The game's pacing follows an escalating curve as you expand your colony, establish resource incomes, and acquire useful bonuses, keeping the late game from becoming boring after you overcome early challenges. There's always something demanding your attention, and each turn remains impactful. Let's start a new game, and we'll cover its core aspects, go over some strategies, some dangers to look out for, and how this game differs from other Mars colonization games. Now, I considered replaying the tutorial for this preview, but honestly, when I beat the tutorial, I discovered more complexity and more depth to the game that I want to express that and show that, so that if you're looking and deciding whether or not you want to buy this, one of the big aspects to a game like this, especially since it's a turn-based game, is its replayability. And fortunately, this game has a lot more replayability than I would have expected, and it pleasantly surprised me and makes me want to play it a lot more. And I'm eager to get through more of the game and see what it has to offer. So, the tutorial, you won't see this screen. In fact, you don't even have the new game button unless you've done a skip for the tutorial. And one of the things that this revealed was that you have multiple scenarios after you get to the tutorial. And these scenarios more or less are just different goals that focus on other aspects of the game. For example, the primary scenario is focused on the points that you get, because there is a scoring mechanism. The red path here focuses on your resource production, and that might seem simple, but a lot of this game is about balancing your resource intakes, and there are workarounds for shortages of different resource types. So actually building the resource production for each type is a challenge in itself. Finally, we have the green path here, which is focused on the actual terraforming. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go with this because I think that showing the growth of your resource production is going to give you a lot of insight into how you grow your colony. And a lot of how this game differs from other games of the genre is focused on how your resource management is, because it's a very resource management intensive game. So this is what we're going to go ahead and go with. Now you'll notice I am Mastery Level 2. Every time you complete a scenario, you get like experience points, I guess is what we'd call it, that progresses you throughout this, unlocking more scenarios, also unlocking other things like leaders, new buildings, and various other options that are integral to the way this game works and is a great aspect for how replayability is rewarding. So let's get started here, and we'll talk about those aspects as they come up. So since I did well in the previous run, or at least did mediocre, I have gained options for when I start the next round. And that's what these are down here. Now, I'm going to quickly look over these, but I'm not going to go over them in too much detail because you're going to learn these things as we do the playthrough. But in short, we're having, resource amounts that we're going to start with. This isn't income. This is just what we have kind of in our warehouse. And then buildings that we can start with. They won't be placed yet. We actually have to build them. And one of the core aspects to this game is that you are acquiring resources kind of into your storage so that you can construct buildings or do projects. So for example, the greenhouse farm takes 10 water. We would start off with 10 water, so we'd be able to place this immediately. The greenhouse farm produces food once per turn, so that's an income growth. And the habitation module gives us population. Population is a little different in this game than you might expect. We'll talk about that once we get into the game. Over here, we're going to go quickly. The university gives us science. Science is more or less a resource. Don't consider it a research element. There are things that we will use science for, and we'll use it in construction of a lot of projects. The laboratory also creates science. So this one is cheaper. It costs 5 nitrate and 5 silicates. This one requires 22 silicates, but it gives a bonus to surrounding science buildings, which is really important because another aspect of the game is managing your space. And then finally we have eco homes. As you can see, it is an example of a population building that requires a different cost level. So this is 20 food and 10 science, whereas this one was 30 food. Otherwise, these two are the same. And finally, the Marcia is a house that has a little bit of a bonus to it because it protects from radiation. That's not something I've really run into very much in this game so far, but I've seen hints of how that's going to become an escalating concern. Otherwise, it is just one population. And the Dome Park provides support per minute, and this is giving +4 support for every building that it's near that provides population. Support is your failure condition. So if you run out of support, it's game over. But we'll go into that again once we get into the game. But for our start, we're actually going to go just with the regular one. So right off, let's go over the user interface real quick. We'll revisit these elements as we go along. But this is your inventory. Consider it your warehouse. None of this is actually in a particular place. Your entire colony has access to this. So unlike many other colonization games, this is not really a survival game. You do not need a certain amount of food per turn to maintain population. Nothing has an upkeep except for your support, which again is your failure condition. Over here are all of your elements for terraforming. So these won't really come into play in the early game, but they're important obviously for some of the end goals. And this big old icon here is for your leader. And this is another interesting element of the game. So let's get into that. So every 10 years, and 1 turn is a year, so every 10 turns, you get a new leader. Your current leader retires, and from my experience, you'll never see them again. Also, your options, in my experience again, don't come back up. So when I pick one of these guys, the other one's not going to be here when the first one retires. So you want to keep that in mind when you're choosing who you're going to have as your leader. Now all leaders have the same first skill, which is explore. And then the second and third skills are unique, and the specialization is very important because the specialization will remain permanent in your colony even after the leader is gone. Now this guy's specialization is actually pretty nice. Constructing regional buildings costs 15% less resources. That'll make sense later, but it's actually pretty decent. Well, let's look at his skills. Earthworks, destroy 2 rocks for free this turn. That's going to save you on power. It's actually pretty nice. Those will make sense when we get into the colonies. And modular apartments. Now this is very nice because this works together with other modular apartments, giving you support per apartment that it's next to. Now in most cases, the abilities are free. Now I have not taken this guy before. I would assume that the modular apartments are free even though it says costs 30 food. But we'll see when we get in the game if we choose him. Let's look at this guy here, security. He has the ability to produce all the resources in the city a second time, but generating -5 support per population. Of course, in the beginning, we're not really producing anything, so this isn't going to be very useful. Police station provides 1 comfort of living. This is really good. Every level of comfort produces one support per population that you have in your city, no matter where they are in the city. Getting comfort in a city is pretty powerful, especially getting to the mid and late game when your support demands start to become pretty high. Let's look at specialization. Increasing your water production by 1 for every 3 water you start producing. So for every 3 water you're producing anywhere on the map, you get a bonus water. That's actually pretty nice as well. You'll end up using a fair amount of water in construction. But I think we're going to go with this guy. So let's select him. So let's look at the map itself. Of course, we have the red planet, and we don't know where things are on it. These borders affect regions. Inside the region, we'll see what the temperature is, -1 in this case. Oxygen is -3, and the rain is -3 as well. We're not going to focus a lot on these, but mostly they're going to change off of these things being completed. Each level of this increases the global impact. So for example, here we have -1 temperature. If we were to complete the temperature once, that means getting 30 heat. The global temperature would go up by 1, and all regions would go up by 1. So this would go from -1 to 0. And the same goes for these. Right now, they're not going to impact anything because we don't have anything that cares about those stats. These are the neighboring locations that we can explore. And then we have the city itself. So we kind of got lucky and kind of didn't get lucky that there aren't any actual rocks on here. So normally we'll have these locations blocked by rocks, or some or multiple of them. And his ability would allow us to get rid of 2 of them for free per turn. Normally removing rocks requires 3 power, and right now we're not generating any power. I know we have a lot of power, but we're not making any, and there are lots of uses for it. So we're going to begin by placing our headquarters. Now the headquarters provides 1 population automatically with it. And as I mentioned before, buildings have adjacency bonuses. And the 2 things that we're going to see adjacency bonuses from the most are population and food production. So this city has a nexus point here where this 1 block sees 4 other blocks. That's something to kind of be aware of when you're planning out your city ahead of time. Fortunately, you can move buildings, so that's not too big of a deal if you don't place it in an optimal place or later on you decide you change your mind. But with this in mind, I'm going to start placing our population buildings so that we keep in mind that we might want to place something here that affects all of our population buildings. Now, even though we start with 1 population, that doesn't help us a whole lot. And I'm going to zoom out here real quick. Now this 0 here is telling us how many expansion areas that we can move into. And it's 0 right now. That first population didn't help us with that. What it did do is it allowed us to place 5 buildings. Population affects how many buildings that we can actually have inside our city. So that's why I wanted to have a population building that we're going to be able to place early on. Unfortunately, we can't place it in the first turn because we don't have 30 food, but we have the greenhouse that we can place. So we're going to place it, I guess, over here. It's fine. And next turn, we'll have enough food for our habitation module. As you can see, we now have 2 buildings placed. And once we have our habitation module down, this will go from 0 to 1, allowing us to expand to a neighboring location, which we'll start exploring. And we know we don't have any rocks, so there's no point in that. And we don't have any food for the modular apartments. So apparently, for this leader, his ability will actually cost the resources. Now, another thing to understand about leaders is that while they have 3 skills, you can only use 1 of the skills per turn. And keep in mind that you only have that leader for 10 turns. So this is another strategic layer to the game, is that you need to kind of judge how important are his unique abilities and when do I need to play them so that I make sure I get the most out of them before he retires and goes away. Now again, Explore is standard for all leaders, and Explore is what we're going to do for him right now. If we look at the areas near us, we see icons for different resources. These are the resources that we are likely to find in there, and if it's a large one, then we're likely to find more of it. We might even find a place where we can mine those resources going forward if we control that area. Now you'll also notice that food is not on this list. It's possible to find food, but it's a surprise. We find supply crates that are lying around. We don't really plan on finding them. But exploring is a good way for us to get influxes in resources that we know that we're going to need based on the things that we're going to build. Now right now we don't know what we need because we don't have anything other than the one building. But I know that we use a lot of water and we use a lot of titanium. So I'm going to hit over here real quick where we have a large hint of water, small hint of titanium. We're going to get some water and titanium when we explore here, and then we're going to find out what is in the location. So we got 4 water, 3 titanium. As it says, we collect some samples when we're there. This is an aquifer, so it has water at the location. So if we inspect the location, if we controlled this area, we could spend 4 energy and 4 titanium to build a permanent mine that will give us 1 water every turn. We also have the option of spending 4 energy to get 10 ocean, which is working on our rainfall level. Unfortunately, doing this would destroy the water resource, and we would not be able to build a mine here afterwards. We would, however, still control the area, and we would be able to place external buildings that cannot go into cities, which we will see those in the future. But again, we can't build this right now because we don't control it. And we can't control it because we don't have the population. So that's all we can do for this turn, but let's look real quick here at our goals for the game. This is showing us how much we have income of each of those resources. And again, for this run, our goal, instead of taking score, is to get +4 of all these resources. All right, let's end this turn and move on. So at the beginning of each turn, we're going to have an option of 3 different research projects. It is possible to expand how many that will get presented to us. It's also possible to get the ability to take more than one of them. We can also decide that we don't want any of them and scrap it for a science. That's not really necessary because we can actually scrap them later for a science. So there's no reason not to just take a resource project. Also, you notice we can close it and start taking our turn, and we can come back and get it later if we're not really sure which one we want. And looking quickly at these buildings, this would provide us a science for 5 nitrate and 5 silicates. This we've already seen, the greenhouse. If we have 10 waters, will give us a food production, which is very nice. Lots of food are necessary, as you saw with this module. It takes 30 food. That's not cheap, and that's actually pretty normal. Energy production, which is also very nice and very important. This comes with a caveat. Any adjacent population provides negative support. So you would have to build this in a city. It says must produce in a city. You can see this little icon right here. That means it goes in a city. It's not hard to avoid negative adjacency issues. So that's not really a big deal. Now all these buildings are actually pretty useful early on, but we know that we're probably going to make a mine real soon for the aquifer. So I think we're going to take another greenhouse. These cards will stay in your hand indefinitely. They don't expire, though there is a limit to how many you can hold. It's been really rare that I've run into a situation where I've been forced to discard cards. Now, we could use the modular apartments here, and again, they work well together, but to be honest, I wanted to be exploring early on, and I don't typically put modules next to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this down. Now, as you saw, this came with +1 support, which is nice. So we have +2 support per turn. Now that we have a spare population, you can see that our maximum amount of buildings has gone up, and we have the option to expand to an explored location. Now, before we expand to here, I want to do a little bit of exploration. Now, we know that we're going to want some water, and this over here has water and more titanium. So this is where I'm going to explore to. As you can see, it takes 1 energy to explore. If we were to go out 2 steps, it would take 2 energy to explore. and so forth the farther and farther away from one of our cities. All right, water, silicate, titanium. Now this is an empty rocky plains. Now there is nothing that we can build inherently on this, but we will end up taking all of our surrounding areas because we will have external buildings that we're going to want to place. But we want to grab this, so we're going to click on our expansion, and we're going to acquire that area. Now I don't have to build something immediately. I can click off of it, but I do want to build something because I want to start getting our water coming in. All right. So you can see we now have +1 water coming in. We have a little bit of a stock of water that we got from exploring the areas. And that's a way that we can push early the things that we need to build. So we're not going to have to wait necessarily for turns to have enough water to build this if we want to spend the energy to explore a little farther out to places that have water in them. But that's all we can do for this turn, so let's move on. Now I would like to establish a power intake. Normally I like to get my power from external buildings, but it's going to be a while before we can build either one of these. Let's take a look before we take it what our tritium options are around the map. And they are none. None of our areas around us have tritium. All right, well with that said, I think I'm actually just going to go ahead and grab a greenhouse. And I'm going to continue to explore because we don't have any rocks to remove. We don't have the food to make another modular farm. And again, we can only use one of his skills per turn, and we want to try to use his skill every turn. So we'll just grab one of these. Bunch of silicate, some nitrates, some science. We'll use all of this later on. All right, very nice. And we found some resources that, again, I mentioned before, you can randomly find food, which is always an excellent surprise. And this is kind of an aspect that makes turns not always predictable and might make you change your plans for a turn. We might have had something that needed 10 food more than what we already had to place, and that kind of shifts our tempo. Unfortunately, we don't have anything that requires food at the moment. That's perfectly fine. Now, the area that we unlocked has a couple of aspects to it. From here, we could build a mine that gives us silicates. Also, it has this little symbol next to it showing that it is high altitude. There are some external buildings that benefit from high altitude. Things like solar panels. They'll produce a set amount of power per turn when placed on an external square, but if they're at high altitude, they will produce even more. But there's nothing else we can do for this turn. We don't have the population to expand here. So let's move on to our next turn. On turn 4, we always get a trade route, and trade routes are very important in this game. Trade routes are important for mitigating the difficulties of getting some resources when you have excessive resources. So consider it we're trading with Earth. We can send them, say, 1 food per turn, and in return, they'll send us 1 of something else. Whatever it is that we want. It's always a one-to-one exchange. So say we had one of those buildings that required tritium. We could start acquiring a tritium every turn at the cost of 1 of our food. Of course, right now we're not really producing enough food that we want to get rid of it. But we do have a fair amount of power, so that would be something that we can consider. And we don't have to use all of our trade routes, so we can just put that away. So first, let's see what our options are on research projects. So this building would give us science. It's always good to have some science coming in. And this one we're already familiar with, habitation. And this is a building that would give bonus food to all neighboring food producers. These are very, very helpful, especially when you can get one into the middle of, say, 3 food production buildings. I think I want to grab this because we are going to be doing a lot in food. And yes, we're really far off on our nitrates, but we can find nitrates around the map as well as trade for them. So let's grab that. It'll be a while before we can place it, but it's good to have it in our inventory. As you can see, we have nitrates here, we have nitrates here, we have them here. We will definitely be able to explore and get to those a little more soon. I'm going to spend a little bit more power because I want both nitrates and I want water. Very nice. That gave us 3 water, which is really important, because that's going to bring us to 10 water and allow us to place a greenhouse a turn sooner. Now, since we know that this is going to give us a bonus for being between food production buildings, we're going to place this one over here and then leave that spot blank so that we can put this there in the future. And again, if you find later that you need to move buildings around, you can do so. There's a button here for relocating. It would take 2 turns for it to start producing again. The move would be immediate. So as you can see, if we move it immediately, it's going to take 2 turns for it to start producing again. And anything that we do, we can always undo. Now you can only undo the previous action. So if I had moved it and then moved something else, I could only undo the previous move. Also, to leave a lot of the screens, you can just right click. That's how we go back to the planet. And there's nothing else we can do. We've already explored. All right, turn 5. All right, this is very nice. Now, I mentioned that you can have adjacency bonuses for your population. This is one of the things that I was planning ahead for. This building would give us 5 support per turn and an additional 2 support per population building that's in its radius. And we are producing water. So I think that we want this. I'm going to grab this because this is a really good building. And now we're not going to be able to build anything this turn. Let's continue our exploration, get ourselves some more nitrate. 3 more nitrate. Very nice. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a trade route. I'm going to export one of our food intake and start bringing in nitrates, because the sooner we can get this built, the sooner we can increase our food intake. All right, moving on. And an exploration satellite. These are excellent. This is an automatic thing that you're going to get towards the beginning of the game. Now, there's normally a cost with building exploration satellites. This is something that we can get during our research project selections, but we get one for free early in the game. I'm going to minimize this real quick. And a satellite allows us to explore any location that we can see at no cost. Now, normally, if I wanted to explore here, this would take 2 because it's 2 away from our city. But if I want to explore with the satellite, it just has a 3-turn cooldown, but it doesn't care about the distance. And exploring with them also gives us the resources. It doesn't matter if you use exploration through your personage, through your leader, or through your exploration. So every time this is available, you definitely want to do it, and you want to kind of go as far out as you can because it saves on our power. So let's look first at what our project options are to see what kind of resources we might want. Here we have an option for robots. Robots are excellent. They count as population, except they don't give us a support bonus. However, one of these hubs comes with 2 robots. And that's excellent because that's 2 areas outwards that we can explore to. And space is a premium in our cities. So robots are very, very useful. There are also other times where we'll get benefits for having robots. We'll go over those as we run into them. And food production, as you can see, doesn't always require water. We can have tuber farms that require nitrates. So it is nice to be able to get these as well so that we're not straining our water supply. But for now, we're going to get some robots. And again, since these are not human populations, they don't benefit from support buildings such as a public bath. So I'm not going to put them in a little quadrant that I'm reserving for population. Instead, I'm just going to dump them off to the side somewhere. That works for me. That expanded our ability to place buildings up to the max, which is 15. That's all the spots can now be placed. But more importantly, it gave us 2 more expansion options. And I think that we're going to expand up to here. And we're going to immediately build this mine. Because again, our end goal here is an income of 4 of each resource. Also, we'll need it for building things. So it's good to establish them. The earlier we establish them, the more they can accumulate. And I'm just going to leave this last one. Now we have 1 location that would cost us 3 to go out to. So I'm going to just go ahead and explore that location. with the satellite. Got us some more water, which is good. More titanium, which is excellent because we are definitely going to use plenty of that. We've already used 8 titanium because it used 4 per mine, so you can see how valuable it is. And down here, where we have the large hint of titanium, is probably a titanium mine. Same goes for this one. And I think that we're going to go ahead and explore this one right here. Titanium and water. Yes, there is a titanium mine, which is also high ground. And we have the option to place a mine. And we have one more expansion option. Now, as we get further away from our city, workers don't like to go far. And using this location is going to net us a minus in our support income, but that's okay. It's really important to have the locations. So don't be shy about expanding out farther. And we can build another mine on a very critical resource. So this is a very productive turn. All right, let's move on. So here we see another important element to the game. -5 support due to rising expectations. This is just going to continue to escalate as the game progresses. So as you can see, the expectations is now -5. We are at a -4 support. Now there's no reason to panic at this point. We're going to grow our support as we go. As you can see, there are also locations that we can explore that will come with support. And another one over here. And we do have a plan. You know, when we can place this public bath, that's going to be 5 support on its own. We already have 2 population buildings. That's going to be +4. So that's +9 support that we're going to have as soon as we can place this building. So as you can see, as long as we plan ahead, this isn't that big of a deal. But it is something to be mindful of, and it can catch you off guard, so always keep an eye on what that's doing. Now let's look at what our projects are. Now here's another support building that would give us +3 per turn for every population that's around us. Now if we do some quick math, we will eventually have 4 of them around this, so this building would produce 12 support per turn, which is pretty good. And the +3 is more than the +2 that we would get from this building. However, this building has 5 support built into it, where the other one doesn't have any. So this one would give us 2 for each one of them. That's 8, plus the 5 for 13. So this building's going to give us 13 support in the long run. Whereas again, this one's only going to give us 12. So we're not going to bother with this one. We do want to get power income up and running. I think, however, I'm going to try to wait a turn or two to see if we can hopefully get an external building like a windmill or something before we commit to one of these. So I think we're going to grab the science building. We'll probably sit on it because we want the nitrate for the soil factory. And we will just continue to explore. And we know we need a lot of nitrates, but as you can see, we have a sandstorm over this location. And if we were to try to explore it now, it would cost us 5 of our support. And getting that nitrate this turn isn't going to make a difference. So we can come back to that, say, next turn probably. We know we need nitrate and water. I think we'll go ahead and explore this one. All right, bonus food, nice. That's going to bring us closer to being ready to spend food once we have a use for it, because again, things require lots of food when we do need to spend it. So the Marcia is a population building that protects its population from radiation. And from what I've seen, radiation really doesn't come into play until a very late game. It hasn't been a major impact, but it is a population building, which is nice. And I know that we need 2 more houses in this city to complete out our little area. So I'm going to grab this, even if we don't use it immediately. And now the sandstorm is left, so we can explore down here, get some more nitrates. And since it detected lots of nitrate, we shouldn't be surprised to find that there's a nitrate mine there. And this is a good time to mention that We did build 2 steps out from our home, but we can't build out to these because we don't control the locations between. We cannot skip locations. So it's going to require 2 population for us to get out to either one of these. And if we were to build to here and then to here, building to here would actually be a 3-step process if we didn't go and get this one instead. Now we have a couple of things that we can build. Let's go into our city. We can increase our support by getting this down on our public baths, which is very nice. But I'm not as concerned about our support at the moment as I am about getting our food ramped up. So I'm going to drop another food building. Just going to drop it over here. I don't expect that we'll do another food loop because, again, space is a premium, but you never know how things are going to go. So this will save me on moving it in the future if that were necessary. And we could place this, but I don't want to yet because we are pretty close to be able to place our food support building. And as you can see, food is demanding. 30 for this, 30 for that. Yeah. So let's just move on. So here is a power support building. So if we're producing a lot of power in our cities, then we can increase the power. This building is amazing. Courthouse. This gives +2 comfort of living, which, as I mentioned earlier, is an additional support for every population, not drone, in the city, no matter where it is. So this doesn't actually have to have an adjacency issue. This is pretty awesome. And here we have our first external building. This produces science, and as I mentioned, we have some locations that are high terrain. This would produce additional science if it were at high terrain. I would actually quite like to have this, but the courthouse, in my experience, is really rare, and there's no way I'm passing this up. This is so good. All right, so our priorities this round is going to be to get this building built because we're within 2 nitrites, and we know we can find at least 2 on exploration. Now, we have the satellite available to do long-range scanning, but I think I want to do his scan first to closer areas to see if there's something else that we might want to scan with the satellite. And this is only 2 away. This will give us the nitrates we need. Now, in this location, there are more than 1 features, which is why it has this little symbol on it as opposed to here where we can see like nitrate deposits. This is going to have an advanced deposit for silicates, but we could also turn it into a natural heritage location. Now, of course, we can only do one or the other. This is a large mine, so it produces 2, which is really nice. We're not going to do anything with it right now, but with our goal being hitting 4 of each type, it's far more likely that we're going to turn this into a mine than we're going to turn it into a heritage site. But that gave us the nitrate that we need to place the soil factory. So let's plop this down. Our production went from 3 to 5. Of course, it's actually 4 right now because we're trading away one of them. But that's going to give us the ability to place a new population next turn, which is going to allow us to expand some more. Now, before we end our turn, let's not forget that we have free explore. I'm going to go pretty far out. We still need nitrates and water, so let's take a look out here. We have water all the way out here. And I think, given how far away it is, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3. Yeah, let's go for this one. This is also going to give us some support. 23 support and 2 water. Also, this is a crater, and craters can house cities. So here's a city full of rocks. Unfortunately, we're about to lose our guy. And this is a good illustration for how our plans can really change on us on any given event. Oh, Sandstorm. These are bad. Fortunately, it looks like it only damaged one building. And this is a good opportunity to show kind of what can really go bad on us. Now, a damaged building will generate -10 support. A sandstorm can hit multiple buildings in a given event. And -10 is not subtle. In one of my games, I had 4 buildings get damaged in one shot, putting me at an additional -40 per turn. I came very close to losing that game because it's not cheap to repair buildings. As you can see for this headquarters, it's going to take 15 food. And while we have 15 food, I don't want to spend it. It says damaged building, auto repairs 1 resource per turn. So every turn, the repair cost is going to go down by 1. So next turn, it will be 14 food. The negative support, however, will not diminish. So if we were to allow this thing to run its full course without intervening, we would lose 150 support over time to this building. That's pretty terrible. So we will end up coming back and repairing it. We're not going to this turn, however, because we have more important uses for our food. If we back out of it, we can see our research projects. Now this is a landing pad. A landing pad increases our trade capability. So right now we can trade 1 product. It would increase this to 2, which is really important to build up our trade routes. This road paver allows you to expand a city without population. So if we were to build this in our starting city, we would have 3 more locations we could expand to without having to put more population in. But it doesn't get the bonuses of support from population or from some of the benefits that we will get from robots from other buildings that we will see down the road. I definitely want to get this landing pad because that is very useful. You know, we're accumulating 1 nitrate per turn through our trade routes. You know, if we need more nitrate, we could double up that speed, for example. Of course, we always have to keep in mind that we are spending resources elsewhere that we are generating. Unfortunately, what we wanted to do this turn was colonize this crater, but we can't. A little detail I failed to mention and honestly kind of forgot in the last turn, which is that you can't colonize a location until all areas around it have been explored. Unfortunately, we're going to lose our leader because even if there was only 1 location left to explore, exploring uses his 1 ability for turn, and we're not going to be able to use his free rocks. Another unfortunate thing is that Sandstorm has moved over our city, which means no matter where we explore, we're looking at -5 support because we're sending people out in the Sandstorm. And that's pretty bad. But I don't want to use any of his other abilities, and I would rather take that -5 and actually make some progress. So we're going to go ahead and explore near as close as we can get to the city that we want to found. Get us some water, titanium, some nitrates. And since we can't actually get here in time to use his ability, I think that we're going to spend our food here at home. Come back later and expand to it. And we're going to place this new house. Which is going to give us the ability to expand to another location. I'm going to expand closer to the nitrates because we already have an income of titanium over here. Also, there's another titanium farm down here. And that's going to allow us to place our first external building, which is our landing pad. Now, these external buildings can be moved, just like the buildings inside, which is pretty nice. And they can be destroyed, which typically you don't want to have to do. But that gives us the option for another trade. And what we want, I think, is another nitrate. And I'm going to eat up our production for water just for a moment because this is going to get us to 5 nitrate, which will allow us to place this building next turn, which will be very nice. Now we are at -10 right now, largely because of our headquarters eating up -10 support. And I want to kind of mitigate that by getting our public baths down. And now, you know, I'm a lot less concerned about repairing the headquarters because we're in the positive. So let's end our 10th turn and say goodbye to our leader, who's now going to retire. Time to get a new leader. Now, as he leaves, remember his specialization, giving us a cost reduction on our regional buildings, is permanent. We will not lose that. And we're going to be given 2 new options for leaders. And again, every leader always has the ability to explore. Her other options are spend 4 water to get 50 support, build a local art gallery, and as you can see, this doesn't have a cost involved with it, +3 support for every location providing support or comfort owned by the city. That's pretty good. And our specialization says if we have 800 or more total support, it will basically, at the beginning of the turn, give us an extra card to look at for, you know, buildings and projects. And it'll allow us to take an extra one, plus it'll expand our hand size. Now this seems awfully premature given that we're at the beginning of the game and we're nowhere near 800 support. And even though this would remain permanently, it would be pretty late before we actually got any value out of it. Let's take a look at the other guy. Gustav. All right. He can just give us +5 energy per turn. That's really good because right now we're not producing energy and we're using it up pretty fast. He has the ability to give us additional cards to look at on a turn. So at the beginning of the turn, when it presents the 3 cards that we could use, we can activate his ability and it will present us those 3 and 2 additional ones. So if we don't like what they are, he gives us the ability to try to find better buildings to meet what we are already producing or whatever our immediate goals are. It's also very useful, and it gives us 3 science every time he does it. Finally, his specialization increases our science production for every 7 robots we have across our entire colony. That's also pretty nice. And it gives us a benefit for having our robots, because remember when we place population, our benefit is that we get plus support. This gets a benefit from robots. We are definitely taking this guy. Alright, I think we're going to wrap it here. The first 10 turns seems like a pretty good preview as to what you should expect from Terraformers. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that it has been informative. And if you're looking at purchasing this game, I hope this gave you the information that you were looking for. I can't stress enough that on the surface this looks actually kind of basic. And when I first looked at it myself, I thought, you know, I like this kind of genre. It didn't look like it was going to be too complex, but I wanted to give it a try anyway. And I really appreciate Goblin's Publishing for sending me a key, because I would have underestimated just how deep this game actually goes, how much each decision matters, and how many different things there are to pay attention to without actually getting overwhelmed. I feel like they've done an excellent job of balancing the challenge and balancing the progression of it. And on top of all of that, there is a ton of replayability, not only in the different scenarios, but because you are building on a profile from game to game where you are unlocking new buildings and new leaders so that your next experience can be enriched with more options. Now, if you're interested in watching the rest of this playthrough, it will be published. But I really wanted this to be an opportunity to show you the basics of the game so that if you are interested in this genre, in resource management and turn-based games, so that you can make a much more informed decision and so that you can get a true and honest opinion from someone who does like this genre and has had the opportunity to see below the surface. So thank you very much for coming out. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been informative. Terraformers is scheduled to come out on April 21st on Steam. So be sure to check it out there if you're interested in purchasing it. Or just watch the rest of this playthrough. So thank you again for watching.